And now we move to the second panel for today. And this panel is going to look at building sustainability in organizations. And we have three panelists, Wendy Kerry, John De Silva, and Carmel Haynes. And our moderator for this panel is Aneal Maharaj. I will introduce Aneal and then hand over the panel discussions in his hands. So Aneal is president of the Caribbean region of Excel Global Solutions, Inc., which is a US-based company. He's a senior business executive with over 25 years experience working with international organizations such as Deloitte & Touche, BP, Amoco, BHP, Ansa McCall, and EGS Inc., which is based in London, in London in the UK, Dorset in the UK, Houston in the US, and across the Caribbean. He has held various leadership roles, including president, COO, chairman, governance committee, group finance director, chairman of a consumer retail group, chairman of a chemical manufacturing company, and head of strategy. And as I said earlier, he is currently EGS's president for Caribbean territories. So you can read all about Aneal more in the profile that is attached to your agenda that was sent earlier this morning. And Aneal, I am happy to welcome you and hand over this panel discussion to you.
Thank you, Kamala, and good afternoon, everyone. I started off my career shredding paper, and I never went to university. But after taking in some of the content today, I just feel that I've been to the University of the CGI. So to the executives of the University of CGI, Kamala, Nigel, everyone else, thank you for asking me to moderate this amazing panel of three exceptional speakers of different backgrounds. And I also recognize my colleague, another senior executive, Gabriel Faria. Always good to hear Gabriel. I heard Gabriel, you moderated in previous sessions, so hopefully I'll live up to some of that. And I also see some of my past colleagues from the Ansa McCall group. I'm seeing Janelle and Nadine, so hello everyone. So today's session, as Kamala said, is about sustainability in organizations. And what you will hear from the panel is a remarkable story that transcends boundaries, that transcends culture, that transcends language, that transcends time, taking account different legislative peculiarities in each territory, different labor laws, and pulling it all together so that every single employee across the organization, across the Caribbean and beyond, operate in a consistent, coherent manner to deliver the objectives, not just of ESG, but also the company's targets, ensuring every employee achieves their career aspirations, and ensuring the host communities within which we work are better off because we are here. So I want to just quickly go through the process. So I will now introduce all of the speakers. Each will speak, and at the end, we will have a quick summary and then open to questions and answers. So first to kick off the panel and leading with her heart is Miss Wendy Kerry. Miss Kerry is a Senior Vice President, Corporate Governance and Corporate Secretary of the Massey Holdings Group. She's an attorney and barrister at law admitted into practice in Trinidad and Tobago, England and Wales. She's a member of the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple in London. And she has academic qualifications, including Bachelor of Arts in History Management from UE, Bachelor of Laws from the University of London. And if that isn't enough, Wendy also has a Master of Science in Economic Regulations and Competition from the City University of London. Ms. Kerry currently serves as a director on the board of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange and a former member of the board of directors of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. Next we have, so Wendy will go first. Next we have Ms. Carmel Haynes. Carmel Haynes is an executive director of BIBA, the Association of Global Business in Barbados, which represents, and Carmel, I did not realize the organization was so expansive. It has over 140 member firms involved in a range of services, ranging from financial services, trade, logistics, management, corporate services. Carmel also sits on the board of the Barbados Private Sector Association. She's a member of the Business Advisory Group for the United Nations Global Compact Caribbean Network. Ms. Haynes was the regional representative for the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in the Caribbean and Southeast USA. And this is a fact I did not know about Carmel. She's a former journalist with Nation Publishing. So I guess we can expect an article out of this later on. So Carmel, it's a real pleasure to have you on this panel. And not to be outdone, Mr. John De Silva. John is an international business executive with over 30 years experience in consumer goods, nutrition, home, personal care, pharmaceuticals. So he spans the whole spectrum of business to business, business to consumer, in distribution, and has held various directorship roles. He has been leading the strategic transformation of Jamaica-based Lasco distributors. John is a former senior executive and country manager of Nestle and Unilever, and he has worked in various organizations and has spent time in different parts of the world in general management, supply chain, ranging from Trinidad, Jamaica, Switzerland, Dominican Republic, and Mexico. So this is indeed a very distinguished panel, and I'm honored to be moderating this session. And I will say this, the topic of sustainability is, we will all hear, and I'll be hearing this for the first time from the three speakers, we'll be hearing it from different perspectives. And at the end, I am sure there will be a common denominator in all of the underlying themes. So with that said, it gives me great pleasure to ask Ms. Wendy Kerry, Senior Vice President, Corporate Governance and the Corporate Secretary of Massey Holdings Limited, to lead us in her speak. Wendy.
Thank you, Aneal. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm speaking today about sustainability in groups. And I'm going to take a slightly different tack than might be expected. Also at the end, I would like to highlight a sustainability issue that is not spoken about enough. I didn't see all of the presentations for Corporate Governance Week, so I'm not sure if and how much of it was actually explored. So in my remarks at the opening ceremony on Sunday, I mentioned that Massey aspires now to be a healing organization. And for us, that is doing more than just assessing and reporting on our net negative or net positive impact as an organization. We see healing as going a step further for the sustainability of people and the planet. So how do we plan to build healing and sustainability practices into a group as large and diverse as Massey, 60 companies in 3 business sectors across 8 countries, speaking 2 languages? It's not easy. And overlaying and complicating that, Massey, like many Caribbean countries, was born out of our colonial heritage of command and control. And we have been on a long, long journey of dismantling and healing that. But the truth is, it can still, and it still does, rear its ugly head because it lives in our unconscious conditioning. It's all connected, our history, our present, and our future. So when speaking of building sustainability into organizations and groups, we must start with governance and leadership. Mervyn King says, corporate governance is essentially about effective leadership, ethical values based on moral duties. So leadership isn't simply a skill set. It's a way of being in the world. You can't read it off of a board skills matrix. And among the things that we hardly talk about what leadership is, it's about humility. It's about vulnerability. I don't know. Can you help me? It's about compassion for ourselves and for others. And that engenders trust. So it's about trust. So recruiting, selecting, training, and succession planning for boards and executive teams is critical. It's critical. Because in order to lead, people must truly care. The directors and executives must be people who care, and they must be consistent. In order to engender trust from your stakeholders, employees, customers, investors, the youth, and I just want to stick a pin there on the youth because that's what I want to talk about at the end. That's an important stakeholder group. Consistency is required. Companies must be reliable and consistent. Leaders must be reliable and consistent. The quality of governance and leadership at the parent board and subsidiary boards remain critical to building sustainability into groups like Massey. ESG is a term that's used to evaluate corporate behavior and performance. But how do you meaningfully do that without evaluating the behavior and performance of the directors and executives? They're not separate. So my second point is around purpose, values, and culture. Alignment on purpose, pursuing a values-based approach to sustainability, and developing a culture of sustainability. These are key for groups of companies. If ESG, and we've heard this many times throughout this week, if ESG is only focused on being policy and process-based and not values-based, it would likely live as an add-on, an appendage, a tick the box. And for a group of companies like Massey that has been moving away from a culture of command and control, we have critical elements in our governance and operational systems that act as a glue for who we collectively are and for sustainability. And this is needed in groups, right? Sometimes we describe ourselves as a family. You have the parent, you have the children. Some are young adults, some are teenagers, some are toddlers. Each is at its different stage of development, and each has different personalities, and each has different needs. One size does not fit all. And so the glue that holds us together is one, our purpose, a force for good, creating value, transforming life. Two, our vision, a global force for good, an investment holding company with a Caribbean heart. Three, alignment on who we are, a conscious organization, a healing organization. Our values, one of our values is love and care, and we mean it. And we get held to account for it from the public, from our employees. ESG, 5, ESG is at the core of an in-house built training program called Expectations of a Massey Leader. We call it EML, and it also has an annual 350-degree feedback component around 5 specific tenets of authentic leadership. An individual's professional and personal behavior is discussed with them based on that feedback, one-on-one, on conscious awareness of self, achieving values-based results, cultivating enduring relationships, co-creating the future, and service to our people. The third aspect of building sustainability into groups is empowerment. Empowerment is ensuring that people can have their voice and ensuring that as a company, you develop the capacity to listen deeply to all your stakeholders. And there are 2 levels, the empowerment at the corporate level and empowerment at the individual level. Just before the pandemic in 2019, the Massey Group agreed to move to what we now call the portfolio model. The parent board devolved greater autonomy to the portfolio boards. We now have 3 main business portfolios, and we spoke of unleashing the entrepreneurial spirit. And as my colleague Anjan said earlier this week, while doing this, we did put on the guardrails. We strengthened the governance of the portfolio boards. They now had independent directors, audit committees. The ERM systems were also strengthened. But this thing about not having to come back to the parent board for every decision created a great agility within all the businesses, and they soared. That empowerment and moving away from command and control was key to profitable and sustainable business. And these businesses are now better poised to manage and integrate ESG into their strategies in a way that would be specific to their sector and their own risk appetite. The challenge at the moment, however, for all companies and not just groups and conglomerates is good data collection and management when we're talking about sustainability and ESG. And we are also on that journey. The empowerment of people, individuals, means at a very basic level, ensuring that people can have their voice, that they have a voice to make their contribution, to fulfill their purpose. So many of us have our voices stifled, and many of us are conditioned in the Caribbean. We are told as children should be seen but not heard. So sometimes now we can feel that it's safer to say nothing. And as a society and as companies, we must encourage people to have their voice. We are more powerful and sustainable when all of our diverse voices can be heard. Fourth, a common belief in what we want to be and become. And for Massey, that's a healing organization. I believe personally that our purpose on this planet, the reason for our existence, is that we are here as part of humanity to ensure that we heal, thrive, and live in abundance. When Massey declared itself a healing organization, what was it saying? It was saying that we care about our people who are burnt out, stressed, have mental health issues, who are sick, whose family member, maybe a child, may have cancer. When that happens, the whole family suffers. We care about our carbon footprint. We want to heal the environment too. And we need help to reduce our impact on the environment right now. But where is our biggest impact? Perhaps what we need most here is our voice. Our voice on the global stage to say that countries causing the most damaging impacts are the ones that must step up, because small island developing states are the most vulnerable. In the last panel discussion, Gabriel referred a few times to Prime Minister Motley's, I think he said brutal speech. Gabriel, you can correct me later on. But she has a voice on our behalf, and it has to be said. Thank you, Mia. Finally, building sustainability into groups requires doing it together. I think everyone for Corporate Governance Week must have heard the Massey song, There's No Me Without You, at least 50 times throughout Corporate Governance Week. Together, we're bigger, better, stronger, better than ever. I'm not going to give up my day job, but I mean, you have to sing it, right? It's so catchy. But we have to be on this journey united. But we do not just want to be together, the parent with our subsidiaries, with our children. We want and need to be together in this with all of our employees, with all of our stakeholders, our youth, and with you, CGCI, and all participants. We are in this together, every single Massey person and every single person that Massey touches. Our Caribbean heart must touch yours. We must be inspired moving into our next century with love, care, healing, compassion, sustainability, and leveraging technology in a way that transforms lives for people. ESG must have a human face. I read somewhere that when trauma happens, it passes down generation to generation until someone decides to heal it. And when you do heal it, it holds for the next 7 generations. I've heard reference a couple of times this week to healing 2 generations. We need more. 2 is not enough. And to drive that point home, can you imagine that so much of this conversation, what happens in organizations, communities, homes, is leadership by command and control? Where did we inherit that model? We are still talking about and living our colonial legacy of command and control because we have not healed the collective trauma of slavery on our societies. Since 1832, when slavery was abolished, how many generations is that? Since 1832, we as the world has not healed from this. And there are many other traumas in our global history, societal traumas around children. Terry in the opening ceremony said that you cannot speak of the future if you're not including children. And I just read a UNICEF paper on tools for integrating children's rights into ESG assessments. And this is something that I invite all of us to think of and pursue. Another UNICEF report, I believe in 2020 during the pandemic, says that 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds lives with a diagnosed mental disorder. And that's the diagnosed cases. Can you imagine how many are undiagnosed? Children have a lot of pressures in these times that we cannot fathom, that we didn't have. Too many children and young people carry the burden of mental health conditions without any support. Children are a key stakeholder both today and tomorrow. They represent the future workforce, consumers, community members, leaders in business and education and government. And as such, by definition, business practices cannot be sustainable if they do not address their impact on children. That's it for me, Aneal. Over to you.
Great. Wendy, that was very powerful and moving. Several aspects of what you said, we will talk about after, but that was very powerful and moving. So thank you, Wendy. We now move on to Carmel. Carmel, as I mentioned, is an executive director of the Barbados International Business Association. Carmel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aneal. And I too would like to echo your sentiment. I found Wendy's presentation extremely powerful, very passionate, and I am loath to follow her, but I will do my best. So, we are gathered here this afternoon to look at sustainability in organizations. And this is really a very broad topic. And as Aneal suggested, we can each bring our own thoughts and ideas to bear on the topic because it can be taken from so many different angles. What I had wanted to really look at is organizations from their human component. And so I would begin by referencing the 1999 World Economic Forum in Davos, where then Secretary General of the United Nations General Assembly Kofi Annan invited the private sector leaders gathered there to enter into a global compact of shared values and principles with the United Nations to put a human face to the global market, as he put it. In concluding this pivotal address, the Secretary General said, "We have to choose between a global market driven only by calculations of short-term profit and one which has a human face. Between a world which condemns a quarter of the human race to starvation and squalor, and one which offers everyone at least a chance of prosperity in a healthy environment. Between a selfish free-for-all in which we ignore the fate of the losers and a future in which the strong and successful accept their responsibilities, showing global vision and leadership." So today, as we discuss building sustainability in organizations, I think it is important that we also keep in mind the human element within organizations. Yes, a sustainable organization is one that can generate a surplus that can be reinvested into its operations to keep it running. But it's also one that has to be mindful of the fact that its own sustainability is inextricably linked to the sustainability of both its employees and its clients. Therefore, sustainability should not be viewed as another buzzword or nice to have, but a concept that should be kept at the forefront in the mind of leaders and managers as they plan and execute their operational strategies. And I think this is also the message, or part of the message, that Wendy was also sending in her presentation, where she really entered into speaking about a people-centered approach to the way in which Massey is taking that leadership position. And we need more organizations to really think about how they go out into the world, how they operate, and how their profits are determined. And so, as I was noting, as the world is fast approaching the 2030 deadline for achieving sustainable development, it probably comes as no surprise that a report in May of this year from the UN General Assembly highlights that we are moderately to severely off track for many of the SDGs. And countries have been asked to recommit to 7 years of accelerated, sustained, and transformative action, both nationally and internationally, to deliver on the promise of the SDGs. But sustainability is not anything that is outside of the realm of Caribbean organizations' purview or thoughts or consideration on a daily basis. The UN Global Compact, as I would have mentioned, or as Aneal would have mentioned, which is a sustainable development initiative, really a call to companies everywhere to align their operations and strategies with the 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. They are in the process of forming a Caribbean network. And when they reached out to companies across the Caribbean to really understand from them what they saw as sustainability issues in the Caribbean, they were able to identify these themes: sustainable tourism, sustainable energy, climate change, SME sustainable development, sustainable oceans, human rights and youth, food security, financing, and development. So you can see from that list how sustainability is really very mainstream and how it impacts every corner of our societies. Most countries within the Caribbean have tourism-based economies. There might be some diversification. So for example, you do have in Barbados where you have a global business sector, and which is the sector which my association represents. But even with this other economic pillar, when COVID-19 ravaged all of us, we saw high and almost unsustainable levels of unemployment. It meant that our outreach to the International Monetary Fund for a structural adjustment program, which was called the Barbados Economic and Recovery and Transformation Program, gained even more traction because of the fact that instead of it us just being a way in which we can regroup and dig ourselves out of the hole caused by the previous financial crisis, this was compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, and therefore we saw unemployment levels reaching 20-something%. We saw many children and their parents having to be separated, as our welfare system had to then step in the form of our childcare boards, etc., and take care of several children. A call went out to the private sector where we were asked to respond, and actually there were roughly 600 families across Barbados, and that government asked us to really help because they were below the poverty line. And since then, this has become escalated as government has now approached the private sector about helping another 1,000 families, and with the idea of it being a revolving cohort of families. They've estimated that almost 30,000 people in Barbados live in poverty. And therefore, if we can help 1,000 families for 2 years at a time, that's been seen as a way of being able to elevate our families out of poverty. Another issue, as I mentioned, is sustainable energy. And we've seen that while the Caribbean is very resource rich where it comes to natural energy resources in terms of solar power, wind energy, wave energy. In some cases, you have geothermal energy because many of our islands lie on that volcanic chain. What we are also struggling with is the resource capacity in terms of technical skills, in terms of financing, and in terms of just being able to, for government to be able to harness this energy, these sources of energy, to be able to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. So, for example, in Barbados, we had a very ambitious target of being, a net zero contributor by 2025, which is not going to be achieved. But I think even with our tiny fleet of electric vehicles, we have just over 300 private electric vehicles used in Barbados. And I think this is still the highest amount in terms of the transition to the EV evolution in the Caribbean. So you can see we're very far behind in reaching those sustainable energy targets. Climate change is obviously a huge issue for us in terms of sustainability. We've seen with the changes in the temperatures, in the wave action, etc., the more intense storm surges and weather systems that are, that we are being faced with. What was once thought of as a once in a generation or once in 100 years occurrence is now being seen almost every year, right? And then this has a knock-on effect of making the Caribbean extremely risky for investment, extremely risky for insurance coverage. And so therefore, again, that has a very significant impact on our ability to be sustainable. And then, of course, we have the issue of SME, sustainable development. The majority, by global standards, the majority of the companies within the Caribbean are small and medium enterprises. And therefore, they do not have the sort of deep pockets and the recourse that some large multinational firms across the world have when they're faced with systemic and exogenous shocks. And therefore, creating that safety net for SMEs is very, very integral in order to ensure that, again, we do not see further slippages below the poverty line in many of our countries. Sustainable oceans. For many years, a lot of our people thought that there's a saying in Barbados, the sea has no back door. There was the idea that, whatever you needed to dump, you could just dump it into the sea. There was the idea that the sea would always be able to replenish itself. So there was, you just fished and the sea was your bounty. You didn't take into account how to manage your fish stocks, how to replenish your fish stocks, how to make sure that you had for your future generations, for your children to be able to continue with the same livelihood as fisher folk as you did. But now we're seeing the real impact of that sort of short-term thinking. And this has been compounded, of course, in many cases by what we're seeing with the incursions by the sargassum seaweed, again, caused by the warming of the oceans. We've seen that proliferation of the sargassum. So then obviously, this is having an impact on, again, our tourism, because it has really, especially for Barbados and some of the other islands where there's a strong beach culture, it's definitely had a negative impact on our beaches. It also has a negative impact on some of our sea life, as in many cases, the sargassum can actually suffocate some of the sea creatures that live just below the surface, especially our turtles, who find it sometimes difficult to find an open spot to come up for air. So of course, this is, the whole notion of a sustainable ocean is also very critical. And then we have human rights and youth. Now, many of us in especially the English-speaking Caribbean don't often think about human rights and children's rights as being something that we are necessarily that we don't protect. But if you take a broader look at how we interact with members of the society who don't reflect what we view as mainstream culture, especially in societies where they're viewed as very conservative and very Christian oriented. The Caribbean, in some cases or in many cases, has some things to answer for where it comes to human rights and where it comes to children's rights, where it comes to understanding that children should have a voice and a say in their own development, in their own protection and their own education. And then we have the issue of food security, as I mentioned before. Again, this is a sustainability issue, going back to the issue of climate change, where we've seen with some of the changing climates, the decimation of some food crops. We've also seen for particular countries where there are not many natural resources and where most of their food is imported, the impact that the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, etc., has had on food supplies, and the driving up of cost and the concomitant, again, impact on the poor in society. And then financing for development. Again, we are in many cases resource scarce and financial resource scarce islands, and therefore we have to seek financing on the world market, both through concessionary grants and loans, and also through private sector loans. And we've seen, especially with all the fallout of the war in Ukraine, we've been seeing interest rates escalating, you know, as again, there's so much competition for financing. And therefore, in the Caribbean, we are also finding it harder to get concessionary rates. And this has a knock-on effect of governments finding it harder to fund their capital works, to fund their welfare programs, etc. So all of these are key sustainability themes, which globally and also within the Caribbean have an impact on our ability to sustain organizations and sustain people. So I just wanted to note that, as I mentioned before, the UN Global Compact is a call to companies everywhere to align their operations and strategies with the 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. It's our ambition to accelerate and scale the global collective impact of business by upholding these 10 principles and delivering the SDGs through accountable companies and ecosystems that enable change. With more than 16,000 companies and 300 non-business signatories based in over 160 companies, forming 69 local networks, the UN Global Compact is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. One global compact uniting business for a better world. And so therefore, together, we can, as companies, as organizations, network to do business responsibly and pursue opportunities to solve societal challenges through business innovation and collaboration. In short, companies must not make the world's problems worse before they try to make them better. Sustainability begins with a company's values and culture, and the 10 principles provide a universal definition for responsible businesses, calling on all companies to operate in ways that, at a minimum, respect fundamental responsibilities in the areas of human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. And this is not, as I mentioned before, these are not nice to haves, because in practice, this means that a company can identify, prevent, and mitigate the negative impacts on society and the environment by establishing a culture of integrity and compliance. And therefore, being able to mitigate these business risks related to the SDGs and adjust their business practices to avoid doing harm and therefore undermining the SDGs. All companies are invited to take fundamental steps like respecting employee rights, not polluting the land, sea, or air, and refusing bribery and extortion in order for the world to make enormous progress towards achieving the SDGs. And we know within the Caribbean that each of these areas, we all have our struggles with. And so just to remind you that while companies might be thinking what's in it for them, why should this adherence to this SDG goal for 2030 matter? A report by Arabesque and the University of Oxford had a meta-analysis of 200 academic studies, took a meta-analysis, of 200 academic studies, in which they noted that good ESG performance resulted in 50% lower cost of capital, 88% better operational performance, 80% better stock price performance, 7% higher return on equity. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, Bloomberg reported that companies with higher ESG scores performed 50% better than their peers. So organizations might think that ESG and this turn towards environment, society, and governance is just the latest fad. They might think it's something that's imposed from outside on them. Some might worry that it's another way of creating a division between us and them. However, my question to you is, what does it hurt? What does it hurt to mainstream and to focus on environmental sustainability, on societal sustainability, and having sustainable governance practices within your organization? We've seen the help that it can do. And even if it is a fad, I think that in the end, the benefits that will be accrued to your organization and the individuals who work with it and do business with it will far outweigh any concerns that may arise that you're just doing this for short-term gain, because it will have a long-term impact. And with that, those are my concluding words. Thank you very much.
Well done, Carmel. Well done. And I can see some underlying themes between what you have said and what Wendy said, but also you've went into the sustainability of the environment and went more into the societal impacts of sustainability. We then go to John, Managing Director, Lasco Distributors based in Jamaica. John, before you start, I just want to say deepest condolences on the passing of Mr. Chin, a true Caribbean visionary, a true man of the soil for the Caribbean. He stood for unity, stood for sustainability. So our deepest condolences to you and your executives and staff. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Aneal. I appreciate that. Very kind words. And so you've given me a very tough task to follow on Wendy and Carmel, but I would take the opportunity to just share with everyone some of the experiences that I've had over the last 25 plus years working in various companies in the FMCG industry. And one thing that's common, all three have had sustainability or sustainability-linked initiatives at the core of their origin and strategy. Now, when these companies started, no one was speaking about sustainability. No one was really speaking about purpose. These were just things that the company's founders did. So Nestle was started essentially by Henri Nestle when he considered it important to find a solution for babies and infants who were getting ill and needed a nutritional supplement. He made a fantastic product at the end. It's what we know today still, 150 years later, as Lactogen. The Lever brothers, many, many years ago, also saw a particular need to help kids improve their overall basic hygiene and created affordable soap, which today is still around and it's called Lifebuoy. And I have the opportunity of here being working with Lasco Distributors Limited for the last 2 years, where the founder, Honorable Lascelles Chin, who Annie just referred to, he found it and he considered it to be quite important that families and kids in particular should have access to affordable nutrition, which tastes great, by the way, and it's called Lasco Food Drink. And this is a company that's only 35 years old. He actually started it when he was 50 years old, and he's built it into something that's actually quite phenomenal. And some of the key things that you see about it, all of these businesses really started with the objective of trying to do something good. And they all started with kids, and really the core, kids and infants are the core of their strategy. And as the businesses evolved, the focus became eventually more and more on activities which essentially linked people, planet, and profit in different ways. And each of these three companies continue to execute certain initiatives that ensure that the needs of these three key stakeholders continue to be met. And I think it's okay to speak about profit, because first and foremost, as directors and senior managers of any company, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the funds that are vested under our care are managed well, and the company executes and delivers its objectives. And there's a more pragmatic reason. To execute the programs and initiatives that ensure sustainability requires money. And the two go hand in hand. Even if we look at the concept of ESG, governance, if we look at corporate governance as that set of a system of integrated rules, processes, and policies through which companies are directed and controlled in the pursuit of their objectives, we all recognize that objectives are becoming increasingly difficult. We have more and more stakeholders that we need to meet. And the external world is continuously evolving. And we meet the needs of many stakeholders. We operate in a multi-stakeholder world, whether they're financial, operational, environmental, social, governance. And to do that, we need to be able to manage and change the way we operate from time to time to ensure that we can adapt the organization while staying true to our values. And I think that's a fundamental thing that has to remain as we start the process of building sustainability into the organization. So one thing I've seen with these three companies, and I've had the opportunity over the last 2 years, particularly with LASCO, to really drive some of that, it really starts with alignment. Everyone in the organization, from the boardroom to the storeroom, needs to understand the purpose and the rationale for that company. You have to support that with appropriate tools and training, documentation, whether it's a code of business practices, whether it's a code of conduct, and that has to be understood. What is acceptable, what is not acceptable behavior, and how we do business for the long term to satisfy all of our stakeholders. The second thing is to ensure that after you have the alignment, that you have the ability at all levels of the organization to actually execute against what you want to achieve. And that requires training, that requires follow-up, that requires all of the steps in talent development, everything from coaching to mentoring to sponsorship, every step along the way of talent development, because talent is essentially what we're talking about. What we're talking about is people. And as you create an operation, a business that is high performing by default, you will begin to look at efficiencies. And efficiencies essentially is very closely tied to what we talk about sustainability, because efficiency is essentially the elimination of waste. How can I make better use of the resources that I have at my disposal? And if that is a knowledge that we can transfer across a wider society, you start to see very clearly the link and the positive impact that business has on organizations. And this third step, I would say, is action. So you have the alignment, you build the ability, and then you have the action. You need to execute. You have to walk the talk. So some of the things, for example, that we've done at LASCO has really been a big part of the recycling initiative. At our own internal operational level, we are moving entirely towards running the operations off of solar. We're going to have the largest solar-powered operation battery storage in the country in a very, very short time. And this is us walking the talk. And to ensure that you remain relevant and successful as the world changes, sometimes you have to make some tough decisions, and you need to change your business model. You need to change your organization. You need to change the core activities that you participate in to ensure that you remain relevant. Coming back to I would say some of the key initial steps around the creation of LASCO, we participated in many categories for many years. In the last 2 years, we've taken a very systematic and strategic approach, moving from a multi-category approach of selling product, shifting the organization towards satisfying consumer needs. So we no longer sell product. We're in the business of satisfying consumer needs in 3 areas: nutrition, hygiene, healthcare. Because everyone in a family wants to provide for their families, meeting the needs of nutrition, hygiene, and healthcare. And I'll just close by linking to what Carmel had referred to. It actually helps business. So over the last 2 years, since we've really taken a very systematic and methodical approach, the performance of the business, we've grown the top line by over 30%. We've grown the bottom line by over 49%. And since we released results of the last financial year, which is 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the share price has gone up by 39% as of today, and the return on equity has exceeded 17%. So I think it's just proof of what Wendy and Carmel have been sharing, that what's good for the planet is good for business. They're not opposed. But it's not easy to find the way. But we think it is possible, but it really starts with the top, and it takes a long-term view and continuous commitment to make it happen. Aneal?
Thank you, John. That was excellent. That's very good. You know, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear each of these speakers, right? And I will say a few words to try to tie the pieces together. And I really look forward to hearing the questions that the audience have, because these are three very accomplished executives, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Jamaica. But when you listen to their storyline, it transcends cultures, it transcends the geography. So Wendy, and it's not possible in time to really capture everything, right? But in listening to Wendy, she took a very different approach to the topic of sustainability. Now notice, and when he spoke about healing from one generation to the next, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, not too long ago, if we had the same conference back then, you would start hearing a lot of discussion around financial performance, right? Significant financial performance. And what Wendy did was provided the overall context, a potential framework within which organizations across boundaries, different cultures, different languages, could come together with that particular glue to achieve sustainability. So when we show up as individuals in society, we crystallize the organization we stand for. When we go to home, at home, we do not change who we are. Home to work to society, we remain true to that. And then Carmel took the conversation further, talking about sustainability from an environmental perspective. And here's where we have a director who has a massive portfolio of overseeing the relationships of over 140 companies within an NGO context. And she spoke a lot about eliminating poverty and uplifting society. And then John took the conversation into another level, which is around building on what Wendy and Carmel said, and these three speakers did not rehearse, so it came together very beautifully. And he spoke about the legacy of Mr. Chin. He spoke about sustainability across generations, building family values. He spoke about selling a product to finding a solution that the world wants. And looking at John's background, that solution is we want to uplift everyday family values. And then he ended with the financial returns, because at the end of the day, we have to satisfy all stakeholders, government, our people, the society in which we operate in. We have to deliver the returns, as well, but to do that in a sensible, moral way. So, and along the way, we built in ESG, the elimination of waste and all of that, right? So I taught this conversation, I learned a lot. So thank you to each of you, to Wendy, Carmel, John. We now get into questions or comments. Kamala, is there any, I'm looking at the feed now. Is there anything?
There's a comment from Lorenzo.
Okay, good.
So
right.
Actually, two comments. So Lorenzo, if you want to unmute,
yes,
and join the conversation, it would be faster.
Yes. It's always better to hear directly rather than read out what you've said, Lorenzo, if you can.
I think for me, I love the thread between the three presentations. Deep inside of it has to do with the heart of leadership and the kind of mind and leadership mind that has to be agreed upon for how we face the world ahead of us. And I love that from Wendy connecting in the issues of the values, which is where John also ended. But in particular, I think for me, the design of business models is important. How you structure things so that all of the key players could allow the business to capture, create, and deliver value to your customers. And again, I like the way John described it, that thing about finding what is the thing that customers need, but then building a model that does that and delivers that responsibly. I think that requires thoughtful action, right? It's not just do what we've always done or follow the models that have worked so far. It requires reframing the challenge, like John and they did, from products to solutions or serving a need, reframing the model, and then rethinking the pathway to delivering on that. So I just wanted to commend those perspectives, and I'm grabbing rich value from you all so far. So thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. So I have a question, right? And it comes back, and it's for the three of you, but it comes from Wendy's talk, which I found quite refreshing in the way Massey is looking at sustainability from the context of society and in particular children. I thought that was quite refreshing. So my question, and I'll ask Wendy to maybe to answer first, is what advice could you give us all in terms of when we talk about sustainability in our business? How do we become more inclusive, for example, by including children, including the livelihood of children, whether it's 10 to 19 years old, not just eligible to work, but how do we engage this potential vulnerable segment of society in our business plans and in our everyday action?
Very good question, Aneal. We are doing two things. We're building it into our foundation and CSR, but we're also building it into the fabric of the organization. So for example, this year, we hope to launch, and when I say launch internally, something called Massey Kids, where, for example, there are different initiatives. So the Massey Foundation supports something like 12 NGOs that support kids. So for example, kids with cancer, kids with special needs, kids in poverty-stricken homes, all sorts of different needs for kids. Another initiative that we're looking at is building programs into the Massey Learning Institute. This might be more integrated into the company for kids. So one of them we're looking at is more of a wellness type initiative. We're still in the process of creating it, called, well, so far we're calling it All Is Well. So where you're creating mindfulness and you're creating a world of all is well to be available for Massey employees, kids, or externally. Another one is we have a program in the Massey Learning Institute called Listen Like a Leader. We want to develop a kids version of that. We are looking at doing a 5K run in Barbados to raise funds for children who are hungry. Carmel would have spoken about the poverty line, and that was an issue. We had some healing, we call them healing workshops that we rolled out earlier this year in Guyana, Trinidad and Barbados. And the Barbados executives, asked for this. They said they really want some help to intervene in that area. So it was actually an initiative that's coming out of those healing workshops, and there are different initiatives that came out of it that we're going to be looking at over the next couple of years. But integrating it into actually the business model, the things that and this is very new for us, right? But the things that we're looking at is more crashes in organizations, in the workplace, where young mothers are, coming to work and they have nowhere to leave their babies or their kids, providing support for things like that. I mean, that would be a hit at Massey stores. You can imagine how many there's single mothers out there that need that kind of support. And it helps with family life and the family unit and, raising kids in a better way, right? So that's one of the big ones we're looking at.
Oh, very good. John, Carmel, would either of you like to comment, add anything in a different perspective, perhaps?
I can add a couple of points if Carmel wants to go first.
Sorry, John, no, you can go
Okay.
on.
No, this is, I think it's a fantastic question. And I'll just share with you some of the things that we've been doing, especially when you talk about including kids in the overall business model design, product portfolio. So some of the things that we've been doing for many, many years has been sponsoring several corporate programs at a national level, Teacher of the Year, Nurse of the Year, as well as Police Officer of the Year. Again, really focused towards ensuring that those workers on the front line of society, providing healthcare, security, and education, they're recognized in a way that only the private sector can do. That's something that we've absolutely been doing for many years. We've also adopted specific schools in what I would consider to be economically challenged areas. And we sponsor and participate in ensuring the schools are kept at a certain standard. At Christmas time and other festive seasons, we'd actually visit the kids, and we have care packages and gifts that we give out. We also visit schools with our Nutriman, which is one of the characters we have linked to the whole nutrition portfolio, teaching kids about the importance of a healthy lifestyle, teaching them good nutrition habits, encouraging a sporting activity. So we're the nutrition sponsor, for example, of CPL, T20, encouraging kids to be active. And then we also have concretely incorporated into our portfolio a fantastic range of sugar-reduced beverages. It's the only one that's compliant with the Ministry of Health's requirements. It's the only one that can be sold in schools, right? We've been reducing the sugar content from 9 grams to 4 grams to now 2 grams per 100 milliliter. So these are some of the things that we've incorporated concretely into the way we do business. There are other aspects which don't necessarily impact only kids, but let's say adolescents. There's a real issue around period poverty. We do support great initiatives with curved sanitary napkins across schools. So these are some of the things that we've been doing to really make sure the kids, the consumers, and the generation of the future are very much within our focus.
Yeah, thanks, John. In fact, I could see some alliance between distributing your brands into Massey stores and when Carmel collaborating for that 5K run in Barbados.
Anytime.
There you go, Caribbean Institute already creating alliances. Good. So,
Absolutely.
John, thank you for that. Carmel, is there anything else you wish to add to that question around children? How do us as leaders in the organization incorporate the youth into our plans?
So, I mean, obviously, as you rightfully mentioned, we do cover over 100 and almost 140 member firms now. And it's difficult to say because different firms take different approaches. But I would say that we do have overall, our Biba charity does have a focus on being, trying to respond to the needs of children. So we have our own charitable foundation, and over the years, we have made contributions to the various children's homes in Barbados. We have sort of coalesced. What we do is we create a channel for our members if they don't want to have to go through the whole process of determining who to give funds to, and or being bothered by people begging them. We sort of sit as an intermediary where we harness funds from our members and channel it to different causes, usually surrounding the healthcare system of Barbados. But we have given in some cases to, as I said, the children's homes of Barbados and supported different initiatives and efforts in that regard. And we do actually have a Biba Charity 5K. So yep, I'll be reaching out to Lasco. Yes, I will. So.
Very good. So John and I will travel to Barbados and participate. Just let us know.
No.
Okay.
I'll spectate. You can.
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper now, right? So that was a wonderful conversation around children. Sometimes the concept of sustainability could be very fluffy. When the four of us met earlier on, we spoke, I made a comment around governance is like the glue that causes all aspects of the performance machinery to stick. Culture, society, environment, and so on. And risk is anything that causes it to unstick. So in your respective organizations, there are so many different facets And as I said, you range from several employees to several members, different dialects, different cultures. How do you create that glue? And how do you measure your performance as you move forward? So question is, and maybe I should answer, put it in this way. How do you create that glue that causes everyone to stay and act consistently in a rapidly changing environment? John mentioned the organization had to pivot and move in a different direction at one point in time. Wendy spoke about healing through the organizations. Carmel spoke about the different aspects of society, from poverty elimination to the environment. How do you get all of the people in your organization to behave and act consistently? And then the second part of the question is, how do you measure that progress? What are the metrics or KPIs, for example? So let's start with the first part of the question. John, you want to go first?
Yes, it's not easy. I think we still have a long way to go. We have over 660 employees spread all across the island. So it's not easy. A lot of them are on the field at any one time. And what I would say is we have focused on creating simple, clear messages that can be easily understood and remembered. We don't have very complex strategy discussions or sessions. I'll tell you, our strategy fits on one page, literally. It's a strategic framework on one page that is cascaded and shared across the organization. As I said, from the boardroom to the storeroom, merchandisers on the front line, deputy chairman, everyone, executive chairman. So we really keep the message very, very simple. And then we ensure that at least at the executive level, everyone understands what it means. And then we cascade that on a frequent basis, essentially through monthly meetings and small group sessions, whether it's a functional view or business view. And we consistently make reference to key actions, accentuating the positive, where people have done something that really links to some of the key messages and the values in particular, and we reinforce that. And that actually takes precedence over the business performance, right? Someone who does the right thing for the right reason and misses a target will be recognized more than someone who has achieved the target doing things the wrong way, right? So we really want to focus on driving the behaviors through, because we are confident that the revenue and the profit will come. That's a byproduct of doing things well. So that's really what we've done, really set that tone, simple messages cascaded, and accentuating the positive when people do the right thing.
Very good. Carmel?
Sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting. I think for us, it really has to come down to a shared mission. So obviously, this is, as we've already covered several times, a very disparate grouping of different companies. Our board is made up of very senior executives who are all volunteers, but all who have jobs in their own rights and have their own stakeholders, to meet the demands of. So therefore, for us, it really has to be that as volunteers, you are invested in the organization. The mission of the organization is to contribute to the economic development of Barbados through the sustainability of our global business sector. And so therefore, you really have to keep that top of mind. And we all try to, as we lead the association, execute on the needs or the directions of our members, that we are all trying to row in that same direction.
Good. Thank you, Carmel. Before we go to the other part of the question, so far, I heard from the three of you simplicity, the one-page strategy from John. I heard from Wendy, the devolving of the delegations of authority to the subsidiaries, to create greater empowerment. at the line level. Carmel, you spoke about the human aspect of that. So it then leads now to the next question. How do you measure progress? So Wendy, would you like to lead us in that? What are the sort of metrics or KPIs, whatever we call it, that you would use in an organization to measure progress?
Business progress or sustainability progress?
Sustainability.
We're very much struggling in that area right now, or at least I should say, I shouldn't say struggling. I should say we are at the start of our journey. So, you know, we have a lot right with the G and we have a lot right with the S. We're still trying to find our place and our space with the E in ESG. And although we have a lot right with the G and the S, we're still at the point of, you know, how do we measure it? What are our targets? So actually we are having a session soon where we're going to come together to identify those things that are the material things for us that have a negative impact and those that have a positive impact. And of course, the measurement of the positive impacts of the S and the G is very difficult because we don't have a framework for that just yet. So we are on our journey, and for the first time this year, we're going to be building some of that into our budgeting process and then into our strategic planning, our strategic plan. So we're still at the very early stages in our journey, but we know where we're going, and we're evolving.
Yeah, thank you. And that your comment at the end, Wendy, leads naturally to this question, or maybe this comment. And that is, you said you're in the process of evolving. And thank you, Wendy, for, I mean, that was a really authentic conversation. Because sometimes when we come to forums like this, and all of you are very authentic, we feel that there's a need to say the answer. But the reality is that in this space, we are all learning, we are all evolving. There's no, I will tell you that I said this in one of my talks last year. No one has gotten ESG right. I mean, no two
evolving, it's dynamic and evolving still, right? So it's a little tough to get it right. And what it means for another company is not what it means for us. And that's a big part of what we're grappling with, right? We're in three sectors, but there's something else that we think is, you know, you hear a lot about what ESG is not, for example, Aneal. You know, it's not CSR, it's not the circular economy, it's not your philanthropy. But you know what? That's also our impact as an organization on the world, on our communities. You know, so what we're looking to do is integrate that into business, make it part of who we are. And I think a big part of why the ESG phenomena is evolving in a way where they want to separate CSR and they want to separate philanthropy is because many companies went about doing business the way they do business, creating negative impacts on the environment, set up a foundation as an add-on and did some good stuff and had some charities and continue doing what they were doing. So the world is now saying, well, none of that. You know, it has to be your impact on business. But it's still baffling to me, right? So just this week, Elon Musk, and I hate to be quoting Elon Musk, but he said ESG is the devil. And the reason why he's saying that is because he has an electric car company which is not producing emissions, you know, like it's good in the E, but companies like tobacco companies are getting very high ESG ratings. And why? Because they're meeting the standards. It's killing people, tobacco is killing people, but they're meeting the standards for ESG, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. They're doing their reporting. So there's something in that, in terms of the ethical balance, that's missing for me. So I think we're still very much on our journey. And it's sort of hard to kind of get on the journey when you see it evolving, but we got to get on the journey.
Yeah, but to me, that just spells opportunity, because it's not always about getting the answer right? Because we're all evolving. The definitions, as we all know, is still changing. No two companies have it right, as John said. But I think what matters is having these types of conversations and setting the targets and getting the present right. I've always believed the permission to create the future lies in getting the present right. It's like me talking to my boss about a career move. Well, after performing the present first, that gives me the permission to talk about a future career. So I think how we execute in the present matters. In fact, when I was in BP London, John Brown, Lord Brown, was the CEO at the time, stood up and told everyone that. He said, we will miss whatever strategic plan we have. That much I'll give you. By the time I approve it, the world has changed. But what I want for the organization to do is to get the present right. And even if we get it 60%, 70% right with our people, at the time 100,000 persons in 100 countries, if we can all understand and behave around the 3 goals, everyone knew the 3 goals, first is safety and everything, then he would retire a happy person, right? And of course, that was way before the Gulf of Mexico disaster, right? But to me, that is where we are as a Caribbean people. We are amongst the best in the world intellectually. We are amongst the best in the world in terms of our resources, but we have to find a way to come together to create something that is truly Caribbean. Yeah. So we could compete well with each other, yes, compete well, but we also collaborate. And that point that I think John raised around waste, which is cornerstone, and this is Kamala's pet topic, I know. Elimination of waste in ESG is key. You eliminate waste, productivity will rise, societal values will rise, right? So I think the topic that each of the 3 of you have presented in terms of sustainability in organizations, you've come up at it from different perspectives. You started off with Wendy saying it has to do with breaking that indentureship, that slavery. As I like to say, we have crossed the pandemic, but there's still a pandemic in the mind. We still feel that we are this small island and so on, but hold on, we could do anything in the world. So we started off with that generational disease or generational need to heal. Into Carmel talking about the environment, to talking about how do we eliminate poverty, right? And John into how you can pivot and still achieve sustainability. How he can create disruption in business and still create sustainability and create all of the objectives, employees, society, environment, and so on, yes, the financials, and still move on. And I think that is the power in what I've heard from the 3 of you, because this effectively speaks to the heart of who we are as a people. This speaks to the heart of transcending business to taking care of humanity, to taking care of society, to taking care of the environment, because it makes good business sense. So no longer, and I hear what Wendy is saying, and she's absolutely right, the labels that we put on things like CSR, for example, is sometimes when you give something a label, your mind moves towards it. Well, we need to sort of break the labels, because this is not about delivering the financial returns and tagging on CSR or EGS because it looks good. No, this is about doing it because it makes good business sense, taking care of the children in society, right? Taking care of the family values. John 3 taglines I'm seeing behind is sharp focus. And Carmel speak about the sustainable energy, the food security, the different objectives of the UN Charter. All of that is there. And then in the conversation, we spoke about the glue that binds the performance machinery together, that binds all of the employees in our organizations together. And also, how do we measure progress? Recognizing that the journey is changing and shifting. Okay. So to me, that is what I got out of it. I would like to summarize and conclude before I hand over to Kamala. But before I do so, Kamala, are there any questions from you or
Yes, I
anyone
was
else?
about to say, Aneal, I would like you to invite Camille in. I love the comment she has put in the chat, and it would be nice to have her join us and actually share that.
Okay. Yes, I'm not seeing the comment, but please, Camille, go ahead.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I just really want to thank the presenters. As was said before, you are all so authentic and you gave us information, but you caused our thinking to widen and to think about things differently. And I did want to say that I am so proud of both LASCO and Massey. And your care for our Caribbean people is evident. And I mentioned LASCO just yesterday, I think, John, when we were talking about family businesses, as such an excellent example of a family business that is now listed on our stock exchange and of which the entire society is so proud. And the fact that even though we have lost such a great leader in LASCHIN, the organization is still strong because your succession planning was there. So I just want to say thank you so much. And yes, Wendy, you are amazing. And I love your Massey song, and I'm singing it too. All right.
Thank you so much, Camille. Yes, sing the song.
Especially when you're going down the aisle of Massey Foods, you can be singing that jingle. Okay, so Kamala, is there any other comments before I wrap and hand over?
That's it. You can ask each of the panelists now for their closing comments, and then you can.
Yes. So if you had to give, and I know you've contributed a lot, one bit of advice to the audience, one pearl of wisdom, lessons learned, whatever you wish to call it, what would that be? And I'll ask Carmel to kick off first.
Okay, thanks, Aneal. The wheels were turning. I was hoping you'd ask somebody else first, but no, I would say that I would reiterate my last point, which was really, and I understand what John and Wendy are saying. These things come at a cost, but what is the cost of doing nothing? I think we've already seen the cost of doing too little or doing in the wrong direction. So let's try the cost of actually meeting the Sustainable Development Goals and see, where we go from there, hopefully to a sustainable future.
Thank you, Carmel. Wendy?
I would say, I think I've been saying it a few times, which is, lead with your heart and, move towards healing in all areas that you see it, for people and the planet. I believe that that's our purpose. We're here for each other. We're linked. We're inextricably linked. Lead with your heart to heal wherever you see it.
Thank you. John?
I would say some things that I've learned that I'd like to share, that what is clear to me is what is good for society is good for business. And if you're lucky to find a place to work, or you have the opportunity to create a vision for yourself, or you're working with someone that has the same vision or the same purpose that you do. If you're lucky enough to find it once, don't let it go. I was lucky, I got it 3 times, but that would be it. Good.
Thanks again, John, Carmel, Wendy. It's been a real pleasure. It's an honor. I recognize the presence of Professor Bob Garrett, so good to have you here. I'll hand you over back now to Kamala. Kamala, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Aneal.